They say that every urban legend has a grain of truth, and if I had known that this peculiar grain would inevitably lead me straight into the nightmare that unfolded that night, I would have resolutely refused the overtime shift. But curiosity has an insidious way of drawing you closer to danger, seducing you with the allure of the unknown while cleverly concealing its jagged teeth. I exhaled a shaky breath as I recalled those last few customers of the day drifting down the long corridor of Rosewood Mall. What should have been an ordinary Friday night, one infused with the promise of a quiet sweep through this hollow shell of a once bustling retail establishment that had succumbed to a sterile silence as the clock's hands danced around 9, morphed into something sinister and foreboding. The glowing red digits on my watch ticked mercilessly down to closing time, and when the final customer ambled through the automatic doors with a blissful ignorance of the darkness unfolding behind him, I felt the all-too-familiar rush of solitude enveloping me, like a heavy blanket draped through an empty room. My old headphones nestled comfortably against my ears, drowning out the persistent hum of the sometimes chilly air conditioning, and replacing it with the comforting yet eerie tones of an old podcast, a familiar friend in an increasingly unfriendly environment. Rosewood Mall had become a labyrinth of memories over the years. On the best of days, every turn revealed either a store I had come to know too well or another echoing crevice leading off into abandoned cafes and untouched arcade games that whispered of laughter from years long forgotten. I thought I had seen it all after years of laboring late shifts as a maintenance worker. Every disheveled corner of this place I believed I had already explored. Or so I thought. 3 hours into my shift, amidst the creeping shadows cast by the flickering fluorescent lights that sputtered in irregular patterns above me, I stumbled upon the first door, a door that seemed unfamiliar and new, one that I didn't recall ever seeing on any blueprints or maps of the mall. The sign posted on it read, "Employees Only." But how relevant was that, I mused, when I was the only soul left wandering through this cavernous space? I pulled the heavy door open, the rusted hinges screaming reminiscently against the gathering darkness. A dim, flickering light greeted me, illuminating a corridor that stretched on almost infinitely, its length lost somewhere in the shadows. The stark white tiles gleamed too brightly for the back of a mall. They bore none of the dirt or grime I typically found collecting in the corners of the public spaces, lending the place a sterile, unsettling aura. An instinctive shiver trickled down my spine, an unwelcome guest, but curiosity, elusive and persuasive, overshadowed my mounting unease. Just a glimpse, I told myself, just a fleeting look before returning to my monotonous duties. As I stepped through the threshold, I felt a sudden weight settle heavily upon my shoulders, oppressive and unfamiliar. I ventured down the corridor, each step echoing too loudly in the silence, and every few feet, I discovered doors leading to vacant stores. An abandoned smoothie shop lay just before me, its counter still set up for a rush that would never materialize, the images of eager customers and clinking glasses only ghosts suspended in the air. The weathered menu board, with items that now existed solely in memory, beckoned me with its promises of fruity blends and tantalizing flavors. I could almost hear the blaring music in my mind, the sweet clanging of the cash register, none of which belonged to this ghostly husk of a storefront. Quickly, I snapped a few photos, the faint click of my phone the only sound piercing through the unsettling quiet that had settled around me. Yet as I turned to retrace my steps, I heard it, footsteps echoing softly but unmistakably from behind me. A chill of dread made my heart thrum, and I slowly turned, my senses frantically trying to decipher the source of the noise. But there was nothing there. Just the flickering lights overhead and a vast expanse of emptiness stretching farther than I could see, each shadow deeper and darker than the last. I continued cautiously, my instincts screaming at me to look back, an inner voice urging caution. The oppressive weight on my chest thickened as I wandered further. A food court lay ahead, eerily silent. Tables were meticulously set, as if awaiting an audience no living soul would claim. Plastic utensils rested in neatly folded napkins, their sterile whiteness stark amidst the deepening shadows. Popcorn scattered in conspicuous piles like breadcrumbs left behind in the chaotic wake of a child's day in the sun. As I froze in place, I noticed then, the echoes weren't mere sounds, they felt deliberate, woven into the fabric of the night. The sounds of movement, of chairs scraping against tile, memories of laughter hidden beneath the hollow strands of silence that tangled around me. I quickly spun around, retreating toward what I thought would be a safe path back to familiarity when I aimed to escape this unnerving episode. But the hallway felt endless. Every turn I took drew me further away from an exit, as if I were trudging around in circles, hopelessly lost in a dream from which I couldn't awaken. My breath quickened as overwhelming dread tightened its grip around me. I pulled my walkie-talkie from my belt, fingers trembling in a plea for comfort. Eric? You there?" Static cracked and fizzled as my voice echoed into the void that answered with a suffocating silence. "Can anyone hear me?" I strained against the overwhelming quiet, praying for a response, a lifeline thrown into the abyss of my isolation. The more I called out, the heavier the air around me felt. I felt the boundaries of time warp and stretch as I wandered. It could have been minutes or perhaps hours, maybe even days merging into a disorienting mix of reality and nightmare. I stumbled into an escalator, its steps bizarrely inviting, beckoning upward toward an unknown glow that shimmered enticingly against the deep, encroaching darkness. For a moment, I wondered if this would finally lead me to the freedom I so desperately sought. But as I ascended, pre-dawn terror gnawed at my insides, and I heard them again, the indifferent footsteps now surrounding me, their rhythm creating a haunting symphony that echoed down the corridor. I turned to face my invisible audience, my heart racing, feeling something sinister shift in the fabric of that deserted mall, or was it truly all in my mind? It was impossible to tell anymore. The shadows felt alive, shifting and watching, something dark and hungry lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, I bolted, a moment of clarity washing over me as I fought against the fog of confusion suffocating my senses. I reached another door that looked vaguely familiar, my hands trembling as I turned the handle, but it found itself locked tightly, stubbornly resisting my frenzied assault. Panic bubbled within me, a rising tide that filled my throat as I rapped my knuckles desperately against the unimposing steel. "Let me out, please." My voice cracked, desperation unfurling within me, twining with fear. No answer. Just the unnerving silence, deafening and all-consuming. With each passing minute, time twisted around me, and the sensation of being pursued grew more intense, bordering on madness. I ducked down another darker hallway where the walls seemed to lean in, closing in like ancient giants eager to eavesdrop on my growing paranoia. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, a startling jolt that almost sent me tumbling into the unknown. I yanked it out only to find the screen was black. Dead. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed behind me, and I spun around, eyes widening as I saw a distant figure slip around the corner. Someone else? Were they ensnared in this unending nightmare too? My mind raced, but there was no alliance in this wide, endless dark. I was utterly alone in this labyrinth of shadows. Daring a glance back, I saw nothing there. The emptiness felt tangible, a smothering cloak of darkness cloaking me in calculated dread. I glanced up at the flickering lights and stifled a scream as I spun on my heel, intent on racing away from what lurked behind. Suddenly, the lights dimmed even further, plunging me into an abyss of near-complete darkness. The footsteps returned, now a steady rhythm, drumming against the encroaching silence, pulling my sanity apart limb by agonizing limb. I couldn't tell if they belonged to me or something unseen, unleashed, perhaps even welcoming. I stumbled backward and found myself facing the escalator once more. Either I could forge ahead, trust the unknown above, or I could risk whatever sinister presence lurked just behind me. Pure instinct propelled me forward. I stepped onto the descending escalator, each upward step whispering promises of escape. As I reached the bottom, I found myself in another food court, but this one felt twisted and wrong. It darkened around me, chairs now overturned, sinister shadows stretching across the floor, and 2 rows of flickering lights pulsated above me, waxing and waning like the beating heart of something alive. Once again, the urgency of time clashed violently against me, but wait. There, in the corner of my eye, a doorway. I darted toward it, adrenaline pushing me to think only of flight. Yet just as I reached for the handle, the unmistakable sound of laughter clawed my attention back, deep and mocking, echoing within the hollow of my skull, reminding me vividly that I was most assuredly not alone in this tangle of backrooms and decayed corners. My heart pounded, reverberating painfully as I yanked the door open, spilling out into the open air and fluorescent lights that bathed the front of the mall in an artificial brightness. But the moment I stepped through, it was an impossibility. The parking lot lay empty and dark, lifeless, save for an old maintenance truck parked beneath the flickering lamppost, casting eerie shadows that flickered as if alive. I felt the very earth of my experience shake beneath my feet as the hopeless walls of that mall were drawn around me anew, closing in with suffocating confidence. Almost by instinct, I raced toward the truck, and suddenly, I was slipping back into the familiar comfort of fluorescent hums and the gentle clink of strange metal tools in their forgotten berths. I couldn't decipher how much time had truly passed. They found me roaming the aisles hours later, though in my mind, it felt like an eternity. The manager asked if I was all right. My responses came forth in unsteady gasps as though unspooling from some deep well of terror. The mall had closed at 9, yet here I remained, stranded in a liminal space that time itself had abandoned along with my rationality. I took the entirety of the next week off, though every solitary night when I closed my eyes, there remained a fragment of my being still imprisoned within that unsettling maze, waiting to see if I would somehow meander back through those ludicrous, cursed doors. If you've ever felt the chilling echo of a presence in a void, then perhaps this channel is meant for you understand all too well why I haven't returned to work yet. The last lingering echo I hear as darkness envelopes me once again is laughter, that dreadful, taunting laughter, echoing still in the recesses of my mind. If you're still here, listening to my confession, heed my warning. Sometimes ignorance can indeed be a blessing, and questioning what is real may lead you to breadcrumbs you're not prepared to follow.